Hi guys, I'm Dan Al-Hanbali, and this is Something to Consider. A family business is a never-ending journey, one that is continually evolving. I've always been fascinated by entrepreneurs that run family businesses, ones that have been passed down from generation to generation. What makes my next guest unique is that his journey is the embodiment of just that. He didn't just inherit a family business, but he's actually the generation that is starting one with the intention of passing it on to his kids. The son of Indian immigrants, born and raised in Chicago, he got his start in the entrepreneurial world early, before spending over a decade working in the defense industry with Boeing, which is actually what brought him to Dubai. In 2016, he launched his business and literally named the brand after himself. Koita Milk was founded with a singular mission: to bring quality food to parents in the region. Inspired by his own family's habits of shopping healthy and organic, Mustafa Koita started the business with a mindset of, if it's not good for my kids, it's not good enough for my... I need to redo that. I need to redo that. And that's what happens behind the scenes. Mustafa Koita started the business with a mindset of, if it's not good enough for my kids, it's not good enough for my consumers' kids. And 7 years later, that brand has grown from offering an organic dairy milk range to 7 different plant-based milks, including a new barista line, all of which are produced in Italy and sold in over 11 countries worldwide, including the United States. Mustafa Koita, welcome to Something to Consider.
Thank you.
I'm so glad to have you here.
I'm glad to be there.
You're one of those people that when I first met, you made such an impression on me. Not just because you were wearing flip-flops, which I feel like I always need to remind you of because it was such a surprise.
I'm wearing them now too.
Which I love. I'm so impressed. Yeah. But when I realized that the person behind the Koita brand was named Mustafa, I have to say, I was a consumer before. I feel like I'm going to be an advocate after. Cool. Like, I feel like you're one of us, and I love that. I'm so proud.
Thank you very much.
Mustafa, you started in the corporate world with Boeing. What drove you to leave that world of stability and start something on your own, especially in an industry that you have nothing to do with?
I think it was a combination of so many things, especially when you're going from corporate to entrepreneurship. Number one, I feel like I was always an entrepreneur inside. Like I had that bug. And before Boeing and before Koita, I had started a bunch of other startups back in the days, which all failed miserably, and I think that I was always trying. And I think after Boeing and at the age I was at and like the experience that I had, it just made sense, at that point. But I think the big driving fact is I just wasn't passionate about anything at the time. I was a little complacent. I was going through my midlife crisis at the time. And I wanted to do something that I believed in. I'm always into like healthy living, healthy eating. I do my yoga and my berries boot camp and stuff like that. And so the food business to me was super fascinating. And that kind of drove me towards it.
As an entrepreneur myself, I know how hard it is to take that jump.
Yeah.
But I think what's interesting about your story and what makes you so different is that you chose to take that jump at a stage in your life where maybe you didn't necessarily have the luxury to.
Yeah.
And I feel like a lot of people would find that surprising and quite bold. And I'm wondering, what got you to actually take that jump at that stage in your life?
Oh, a couple things. I mean, it probably wasn't the best time to ever, like, entrepreneurship is like, when's the right time to have a kid? There's never really a right time. You just got to like do it and believe in yourself and believe in fate. And it, things will kind of fall in place if it was meant to be. That being said, look, I was in the middle of having my third kid, and Mario was like, look, you're moving from defense to like food. Right. And, you're 38 at the time. Are you sure you really want to do this? And I kind of had some money saved up and I was like, yeah, I want to go into this business. And I think that what I realized is that to take a risk like that, just because I didn't have industry expertise wasn't the issue. I had common sense expertise. I had life experience. I had the drive and motivation. And those are the factors that gave me the confidence to make the jump into something. I was like, I know I could figure it out. I'd been in the region. I understood salesmanship, how to be a marketeer from my previous jobs. And, all those skills and experiences kind of gave me the the grit to like make the jump.
Do you think that a big part of it, though, was becoming a father? Having that kind of, because we're talking about starting a business that has your name on it.
Yeah.
There's a very personal aspect to you wanting to build a brand like this.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I think there's two parts to it. One, in becoming a father, becoming a father is probably the single most important life change in my life, more than even my marriage or any of the other things that happened before that, because it's the first time you feel selflessness ever, right? Because there's something that's more important than you that you just die for, you know? And so there's I went through a maturity stage when I had when Serena was born, even more so when my son was born. And then when my Sophia was born, that was the third, layer of it. So one, being a father just matured me in a different way. And two, it was sort of the drive for me to I wanted to create a legacy. So the beautiful thing about being in Dubai or being in the region is there's a lot of family businesses here, right? And I think the UAE is all about entrepreneurship and trying new things and whatnot. And so I think a little bit of that, I always wanted to create something that I could hand to my kids, and that was another factor.
Do you think that also stems from your history of your parents immigrating to the States and having to, I would assume, start from scratch in some way?
Look, I mean, my history, I don't know if it was just my parents moving to the US and, me being first generation, coconut in the US. I think a lot of it had to do with the fact that when I was really young and I was growing up, when I was 13, my mom died.
Oh, wow.
And it was a huge trauma to me. And it's sort of if you really want to get to what drove me or where sort of the fire came from, I had this really huge challenge in my personal life at a young age. And I was actually in the room when my mom passed away in front of me. And it just scarred me for life. It totally messed me up. And I went from that Indian kid who was supposed to have straight A's, go to Harvard and become a doctor, or whatnot, to a kid who was barely passing high school, hanging with the wrong crowd, getting into all the sort of negative influences. And that set me back, right? And so what I think I'm proud of in terms of my story and what happened in my childhood that really affected my professional life is that I got set back. And at some stage in my life, I was like, oh my God, I have to catch up, right? And my peers, all my peers when I was growing up in Chicago, were getting straight A's. We're getting into Yale and Harvard. And we're becoming successful consultants, making six-figure jobs. And I was going to a regular state school, barely getting a job. It was hard when I was trying to get married. The parents were like, what does this kid do? He doesn't have the, Indian parents are tough. They're like, I want to see your
Arab
CV.
Parents.
They're like, forget love.
Yeah.
I want to see your CV. And at a young age, I found myself having to catch up. And I learned how to catch up was by taking risks. And instead of getting a job as a McKinsey consultant making $200,000 a year, I would get a job as a sales guy making $30,000 that got a shit ton of commissions, and I would sell my heart out and then make more money, right? So my fire, my drive that affects me today was actually sort of because of seeds planted when I was a kid. And it was kind of a shitty childhood, but that stuff is what made me today. It gave me the grit to make those jumps.
That's amazing. Yeah. A lot of that actually resonates with me because I grew up between my hometown in Kuwait and the States. And a lot of my drive, I was the kid getting the great grades in school. I was always pushed to kind of be at the top of my game all the time, which was quite exhausting, but it kind of positioned my mindset in a way where I was always in pursuit of something.
Yeah.
But also a lot of that had to do with the expectations that were set by my own parents.
Yeah.
What was your relationship like with your father?
So I would say it was a tough relationship because my father was, kind of set in his ways. He's very hard to impress, even to this day. And he lost his wife, so he was single parent in America with these two crazy kids, right? So I'd say there were some pretty tough moments between me and my dad. We only reconciled a lot of them later on in my life. But he remarried and I got two stepbrothers. And then I had a stepmom. I feel awkward even calling her stepmom because she gave us so much love when I was younger that I feel like she's like my mom, And I think when he remarried, that helped him with his relationship with me because he had a partner, again in life. And so I kind of went through a lot of that struggle and I saw a lot of things. And I feel like that moment really made me grow up quicker, and that was the silver lining.
I'd imagine so. When it came to the way that you guys were raised, though, at your house, when it came to the values that you followed, your name's Mustafa, so I assume that you're Muslim.
Yes.
When it came to your upbringing, what are specific values that you guys kind of clung to as a family?
Look, I think my dad, at a very early age, even though he could afford it, to a certain extent, he was very frugal with his money. Like he was an Indian Gujarati parent. It's like the cheapest race on the planet, And so, jokes aside, the value for money and work ethic, like my dad worked his ass off. Like he was raising 4 kids, at the time, and didn't have a lot of support around him. Here, in the region, you have lots of family and uncles and aunties, and this guy will help you get this job. He was kind of, he moved from India at a young age and, had to make it on his own. So I think his work ethic was instilled in me. He was very jovial. It was kind of funny. I feel like I'm turning into my dad for the good or bad,
Isn't it funny how that happens?
I know. And so he also, was super honest, like uncomfortably honest about things. Like if there was something happening in the family within our 4 brothers, he would just throw it right in our face. And I appreciate that because I'm like that now with my family. And I appreciate a very super transparent atmosphere. So I'd say honesty, hard work, grit. And I had my first job was when I was 13. I was bussing tables and my dad would not pay for anything. So I wanted to go on like a little Wisconsin Dells trip with my friends. And he's like, I'm not going to give you the money. You can get a job. And I'm like, Dad, I'm 13. I can't even get a job. He's like, well, let's go talk to the city council and see if you can get this special work permit to be a busboy. So we went. I had to get like a written thing from my school and then he made me work for it. So, those are some of the memories and things that he sort of instilled in me.
Do you feel like a lot of those values, though, found a way into the company that you're trying to create?
Absolutely.
In what way?
Look, I mean, when you're starting up, like you don't have any money, right? I was just like broke. It was just like my life savings and stuff. So you have to be very frugal. And I'm not saying cheap, but you just have to be very strategic. I didn't splurge on like an office or like crazy advertising. We were very targeted because I think of one of those values. I think my dad was always super honest and fair. And so I think a combination of that and me having a lot of shitty bosses as I grew through my professional career made me feel like as I hired people, I almost feel like I work for my employees. Like I need to make sure they're happy, right, at the end of the day. So I think that's another value. And, persistence is everything. My dad, like if he set his mind on something or if I set my mind or promised him something, you better damn well believe like I had to follow through. So I've been super persistent. I think that's the number one factor. So I don't give up very easily. If I really believe in something, like we got to make it happen. And I'm the person that leads by example. So I'll get in the trenches with my team. And I did a lot of it when we were just 2 employees, So I think a lot of those things like have come through in the company.
You mentioned when you were at that kind of fork in the road, before you started your business, you went through, you called it a midlife crisis.
Yeah.
You actually mentioned in previous interviews that you've had multiple midlife crises.
I have. I think I get first place for the number of midlife crises.
How would you define a midlife crisis?
Oh, man. So I think midlife crises, they're good, actually. It depends on how you react.
I agree.
But I think they're those come to Jesus moments where you're like, I think it's a combination of being real with where you are in your life and being real with where you really want to be in life. And it's really hard, even for me, to figure out where I want to go. It's a hard question. Like, what do you want to do with this? What's the purpose? What's the why, right? And, every once in a while, you see a speaker, you meet a friend, or you read a book, or you have those aha moments. And I've had a number of those, and they're uncomfortable, midlife crises, but they're great. They're only great like 6 months later.
Yeah, obviously.
When you're in it,
when something comes out
you're
of
like,
it.
this sucks. But then I always know in 6 months there will be something good that comes out of it.
Do you? Like, have you gotten to a stage where you feel like when they hit, you know how to handle them better?
Now I do. Now I think as an entrepreneur and being in the biz for 10 years and bootstrapping this thing for the last 10 years, I've had a shit ton of them, and so I've almost gone out of business a couple times. I've had massive issues with regulatory stuff that comes up, all the cash flow issues, are top of the pile. I think there's two things. I think because for me to get through challenging times, I now realize that I just have to look at my history. And I remind myself or pinch myself to look at all the challenging times I had over the last 10 years. And now I'm like, all right, what's next? And what I've done is a little secret is I demand planned problems. So I'm like, listen, every year, every month, there's going to be a shitty problem, and so when it happens, I'm like, oh, this is this month's shitty problem. Every quarter, there's going to be a big problem. So I'm like, oh, this is this quarter's big. And every year there's like, oh crap, like one of those moments. And I'm like, all right, this is this year's challenge. And I always do overcome them. And I think I have built up the self-confidence to deal with them. And that gives you a steady hand when you're growing.
Do you think that comes from you also being someone who's drawn to making or taking calculated risks?
Look, I think there's a risk-reward ratio, right? And I've just tested and learned a lot of risks in my life. And as you test and learn more risks in your life, whether it's risks in your personal life, professional life, they're all kind of the same engine that's having you manage the risk-reward methodology, I guess you could call it. And yeah, I've gotten better at managing risk. You have to have your radar up. You got to be able to gauge, is this person someone I can trust? Is this, partner going to come through for us? Do I think this product's going to hit? They're all risks that you take, calculated risks. So my short answer is yes.
It's interesting. Obviously, I know a lot of entrepreneurs. I've started my own businesses.
Sure.
And what's interesting about you and your track record is how unbelievably positive you are when it comes to talking about your experiences. But I know firsthand what things like burnout and anxiety and the stress of running your own business brings. Yeah. I know that from my own firsthand experience. How do you feel like you've been able to balance that throughout your journey from beginning till now? And how has it evolved, actually?
Look, so over the decade, I have burnt out and I have taken it the wrong way and reacted the wrong way. The beautiful thing about that is, as I've gone through that, I've learned how to deal with it as I evolve. And, especially when you're bootstrapping a company, your personal life and your professional life are the same, right? You cannot, there's no work-life balance. It didn't work for me at least, So I think in terms of dealing with it, I've dealt with it with a number of tools, that I've learned from my peers that are also entrepreneurs. So number one is healthy body, healthy mind, so like I've really made sure in the later years of my life to take care of myself. So like I do yoga 3 times a week. I work out with a trainer 3 times a week. I'm doing my HIIT class or spin class, whatever. And I've noticed that anytime I'm stressed, physical activity is the number one thing to help me de-stress. I eat healthy. Obviously, I'm in the food business, so I know the importance of eating and sleeping. So these are all things that I think when I was growing up, I was like, workout is most important, then, eating and then sleep. And I've realized now that sleep, eating, and then working out are, sort of the primary thing. So that helps me. Number 2 is I started journaling a lot, so I've been journaling for the last 4 or 5 years, and I pull out, my friends give me so much shit about my diary, but I love it because like when you're stressed and you journal, whatever's inside is kind of coming out, and when you write it down, your mind processes stress, and journaling has been awesome for me. I think talking to peers, and I think I don't go to advice. I have great friends, and I ask for advice. I'm not afraid to ask for advice. And I think you got to ask the right people, right? Yeah. So like, for example, commercial advice, I don't ask the richest guy or the guy with the Rolex. I ask someone who's like gone through a similar experience as me, right? So I've learned to ask the right people. Those are kind of some of the tools that I've used.
Has it been easy to kind of find a community to support you in this journey? Because, a lot of the businesses that we're familiar with in the region, even if they are family businesses, they're backed by a family,
Yeah,
a complete family. There's the brothers, there's the cousins, there's the uncles, there's the aunts, there's the father. This is you.
Yeah.
What has that experience been like?
Yeah. I mean, since I'm not second gen money or, and I kind of started it, it does get very lonely at times. I joined an organization that we're both familiar, EO, and EO has a number of entrepreneurs, a mix of second gen money, but also first generation entrepreneurs. So through that network, I've met people just like myself who've bootstrapped and self-funded an organization. And I'm like, hey, I'm having this horrible problem. Like, how did you deal with it? So again, that's helped me do it. But, I think loneliness is a tough thing, because even when you've got those peers next to you, you're struggling and fighting, especially in the first 4 or 5 years of the business. You're on your own. You can't pick up the phone and meet someone all the time.
Yeah.
And I think that I've just used what I think of as common sense and kind of gone back to my old family values. And when I'm in a tough decision, I kind of think, what's the right thing to do and what's the best that I can do?
I mean, but has an experience like this taken a toll on your family?
Oh, totally, totally. I mean, I think early on, when I started the company, look, when you start the company, the first year or two is kind of fun. There's not a lot of, the biggest disaster isn't going to sink you, right? Because the numbers that you're talking about are small. And then you grow and you get that little PR and, there's an excitement stage. And then you grow and, more money, more problems, So like if 100 customers are late by 15 days, the amount outstanding is huge versus one customer that's late, for 15 days. And so look, it took a toll on my family for sure. I would say that the first couple of years, I have 3 kids. I didn't get to spend, I think, quality time with them. It definitely affected my marriage. I ended up getting divorced. I wouldn't say it was because of the company, but, and that was probably because of some other issues, but that doesn't help. It's a very stressful moment. And I think as I evolved into becoming a more mature entrepreneur, and as I evolved into becoming a more mature person, it helped me a lot, and I kind of grew through those struggles. And now I feel like after all my learnings and all the shit that I went through, I'm in a really good place.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
It's amazing to come to that realization. But unfortunately, it's a story that I don't think gets told enough, because these are things that even I can relate to. I'm not married. I don't have kids. I'm not in that situation. But as much as I've loved being, whatever you want to call it, my own boss, having my own company, it's an incredibly isolating experience. And it doesn't kind of make you the easiest candidate for relationships, which is difficult, And usually the assumption when you do start your own business is, you probably have more access to others and more time for yourself, when that's not really the case.
No.
I actually found that it was easier to balance my life when I worked for someone else, believe it or not.
I know.
So it's interesting, but then in a weird way, it kind of, in my case at least, it pushes me towards purpose a lot more.
Yeah.
And I've noticed that a lot with kind of the values and the messaging, and very specifically how you talk about the people that work at Koita.
Yeah.
I feel like what you're building is a lot more than an actual product.
Yeah. I mean, I'm really proud of the fact that we've built, like a family. We have now about 35 employees. I love them. I love them all. And the employees, my purpose originally was like, I want to build the best company with a great product for my consumers. And now that, we went from 1 to 35 families that are now dependent on us, I feel like responsible, and my KPIs used to be like, hey, am I going to get like this amount of productivity out of them? And now our KPI for our head of HR is actually a very subjective one. It's like, you need to make them happy, right? And so I get so happy when I see like employees who've joined us and now they have, 5-6 years later, they have 2 kids and a family, and our healthcare benefits like took them through whatever challenges and this and that, like, there are ups and downs, but I get just as much gratification out of making my employees move up in terms of their standard of living as I do having a kid smile when he has a Koita Milk, or someone who has a lactose problem have a lactose-free milk, or whatever. And it's part of my why now. I want them to grow with me.
It's interesting because at the end of the day, it is a family business and you're almost creating this internal family.
Yeah.
What do your kids think of the brand?
So the kids were involved in the brand very early on. Serena, my eldest, she's going to love this, but she helped me design the packaging.
No way.
Yeah. So the little cow that everyone.
Incredible.
Yeah.
She did the cow.
Yeah.
I love the cow.
She's going to be like, Dad, I want a commission now.
Oh my God. She deserves it.
Yeah.
It's her company.
And, they've inspired me a lot. Danielle flew to Italy because we tasted 237 different varieties of chocolate milk.
Wow.
And we wanted to get just the perfect one. And so we met with a bunch of Italian chocolate connoisseurs and my son. And we tasted so much chocolate milk that zits were popping out of our cheeks. Sophia actually helped me with my strawberry milk. So and the kids have been kind of part of the journey. So I know they roll their eyes when I ask them to be part of Koita events and stuff like that, but I think they really like it. It's always nice, when your name is on a milk pack that your friends have in their school boxes.
Absolutely.
So I think they like it. But their mom has a very successful family business. I have a family business. So they're around entrepreneurship all the time. And so I think it'll rub off on them, hopefully in a positive way.
Do you think they'd end up working with the company?
I don't know. I'm going to let them decide what they want to do. Look, my dream has always been Serena's this, Danielle's that, and Sophia's got this position in the company, but they're too young and I don't know where, it's up to them. It's whatever makes them happy.
So it wouldn't bother you if they didn't necessarily work?
No, it wouldn't. As long as they're drinking my milk, I'm happy.
I think that's fair.
Yeah.
That's fair.
Yeah.
There's a beautiful story that I heard about a compliment your dad gave you.
Oh,
can you share that story?
Yeah. So my dad, he's pretty tough, and so I think in my entire life, I got one compliment ever in my entire life from him. Probably when I got married. He loves Maria, to this day. And so, as we expanded, we launched into the United States, and I was really proud when we got into the U.S. It was tough. It cost a lot of money to do business there, but we slugged it out, and we got awarded a contract about a year and a half ago with Sprouts. So we're in 380 stores across 25 states.
Wow.
Yeah, with our plant-based milks, and very proud moment.
Mashallah.
And in the U.S., the Wall Street Journal covered us. And so as my company's been growing, my dad sees these snippets that I send him, and I send him to social media, and he's like, I don't care. He's like, until I see it in my store, it doesn't mean jack to me, And he just never did anything. And so I remember in the summer, we were featured in the Wall Street Journal. And the one thing my dad does religiously is every morning he picks up the Wall Street Journal and reads it. And so he picked it up, and it was just such a proud moment for my father to see his family name in the WSJ. And I think I got my second compliment ever, Aww. So that was worth it. The other compliment that I liked is Harvard Business School did a case study about us. And
wow.
Yeah, so I was in a Harvard executive MBA, and I met Professor Linda Applegate, who's in charge of the entrepreneurship program. She's like, what do you do? And I'm like, I'm Mustafa Koita. I started this milk company in Dubai. And she's like, Dubai? How'd you do that? And she was like, who's your competition? And I'm like, on the dairy side, I compete with a $16 billion company. And on the plant-based side, I compete with a $40 billion company. She's like, how did you do it? Whatever. So I told her, and she's like, could we write a case study about you? It was also through EO that I met her. And so Harvard sent case study writers over to interview us. And then, so they wrote it, and now they teach a Harvard Business School case study called Koita Milk every year in Boston.
Wow.
And so Serena, who's in boarding school right now, she's in Connecticut. I was the guest speaker for one of them. So I brought her in.
Wow.
And that was the first time my daughter ever was like, Dad, you're kind of cool. You know what I mean? So that was my other compliment that I
love that.
Love the most. Too.
I think that's incredible.
Yeah.
In a weird way, it's almost like this is a venture that brought you back home.
Yeah. Yeah. I think so. I mean, it is nice going back, having your product in the US, you know?
It's a huge accomplishment.
Yeah,
It's not
yeah.
just nice.
I'm
It's
just
like
trying to.
It's, I mean, let's be honest. That's huge. It's huge.
Yeah.
Good for you.
It's
You should be
nice.
so proud.
I'm just hoping, like, you know, my packs of milk are in all those stores where my ex-girlfriend shop. So they'll be like, oh, Koita, I knew that guy.
You could always send them to her.
Just rub it in their face.
Literally,
you know?
literally. I love it.
Yeah.
I'm not someone who loves advice in general. I love experience shares. That's specifically why I love EO. But because we are in a region where there are a lot of family businesses, and the interesting thing about family businesses in general, especially amongst Arabs, is that the biggest struggle is always around this idea of how do we maintain the values that we started with and evolve as the market and our audience evolve. So one, when it comes to Koita, you know, how do you think you guys, you know, can evolve with the times? That's one. And two, what experience share or what advice would you give to someone that wants to start a family business?
Oh, wow. Those are big questions, you know, and they're big answers, you know, to do justice to them. I would say that as you're scaling and you want to keep your values in that, you know, that homegrown feel and whatnot, you just got to be really careful, you know? And I think part of it is getting the right people and processes in place. So the people that you start with have to grow and scale with the company. And some of them you have to and you have two types of people, the organization. Some that will fight it and their personality is not designed to scale with the company. We've gone through 2 scaling phases, right? So the people that I started with are not some of the people here. And then there's some people that are so passionate and so dedicated, and they don't have an ego, and they want to just get the job done. And we really believe in upskilling and giving everyone a chance who started with us, you know. And there's a few people with me that have grown with the company. By the way, just as I've grown, because I went from a startup guy to an entrepreneur to now a CEO, right? And now I have a board, right? So like I've also had to grow. So
you appointed a board to keep you accountable within your own company.
Oh yeah. And
that's incredible.
I have 2 board members, and I made sure that I got board members who were bold enough to tell me where to stick it, you know, when I needed to. And they just tore me apart on the first board meeting that I had last year. They just tore me apart. And it was the greatest thing, you know, because you need someone like, or a couple people like that to keep you accountable. And they know the region, they know the CPG business. They're both out of the United States, actually. But they've been a blessing. They've been a blessing. Yeah. So to answer your question, if you want to keep the culture alive throughout your journey as you scale, you gotta have your people and your processes adapt. And, you know, I think the US has a really good template for keeping very flat organizations in place and helping you retain the values. You know, so I've looked at some of the examples of other companies that have scaled and read their case studies and called up their CEOs in some cases and asked them how they've done it. And they've shared with me how they've done it, you know, so that's part one. Your second question is, you know, if you're thinking about starting a business, I would say, you know, there's a lot of things that I could say about it, but number one is, you know, it is not for the faint-hearted. You know, it is a tough thing to do. And the good thing is it will change you as a person. Yeah. Because it will tear you apart. You'll be in tears. You'll think that you're a failure in front of all of your friends, in front of your family. You'll be scared that you're losing income. You know, you'll be torn with cash flow issues. So you need to have the grit to get through and be ready to get through a lot of challenges. If you watch a couple episodes of Shark Tank and you see some PR and you get excited and you think it's all fun and games, that's not it. So I think number one is be ready to, like, you know, tough it out. I think the second thing is talk to other people that have started businesses from the ground up, and talk to people that have failed and talk to people that have succeeded. And frankly, you'll learn a lot from the failures because they'll tell you. Probably
more.
Yeah, probably more. Because when I meet people who just like been like, I've never made a mistake, I know something's a little off, you know, like that's just not real.
I agree.
So that's the second thing I would say. And then set the expectations on yourself also to be realistic. Like there's a lot of people that are like, go big or go home, and you have to do this, and you have to have this much margin. You have to, you have to follow your heart, use your common sense, right? But talk to people that have gone through it from the ground up. And that's been amazing for me. So I've always been open to asking questions and learning, and there's no stupid question.
I absolutely agree with that. And what's interesting, I think the way that you highlighted that you started as the business owner and you ended as the CEO, even that is a process. And I think that's a misconception that a lot of people have, that, from day one, what the hell you're doing, but that's very much not the case. No. It takes a while to get there. And again, mashallah, this has been a 7-year journey.
10 now, total.
10, mashallah.
The brand was launched 7 years ago. The company actually I started out trading.
Okay.
Then I got into distribution of other products to kind of learn how to build brands on someone else's coin and make less expensive mistakes. And then I launched Koita 7 years ago. And then I got rid of the trading and the distribution business. So I also took a lot of baby steps, right? So I think I've always been someone who's like, even today, I'm learning. Like I'm learning so much. And people are always asking me for advice. And I actually learn from the scrappy entrepreneur who's starting today, because there's new things that they're doing. There's no new creative things that they're doing in today's world. Don't have an ego. Like I have 2 daughters, so I have no ego whatsoever. And those are, some of the things that have helped.
It's interesting because, you mentioned persistence at the beginning of the episode, and it really feels like if we were to kind of sum up what Koita's legacy is, it really is that, even in terms of the business itself. You pivoted the first couple of years before it ended up being this final product.
Yeah.
If I were to ask you, how do you define success though? What to you is the ultimate success for Mustafa, for Koita, for the entire Koita family?
Yeah. I think my definition of success has evolved as I've matured and grown and as the company's grown. So I think if you ask Mustafa in year 1, what is success? I'd be like, hey man, I need revenue, Then like a couple of years later, I think success was like, I need gross profit, I think then it evolved to like, hey, is my cash flow, working? That, cash flow positive. I think now is, are my employees and my consumers happy? And I think it's evolving into, am I happy and content? And what does that mean, And so, look, I've just matured through the process, and I think it's going to continue to evolve as I evolve, personally. But my answer has changed, and I think that's normal. I think if you're an entrepreneur and you're starting out today, don't expect to have all the answers right now. Don't expect to have a 5-year business plan. I think just go into it with, hey, I'm going to learn. Go into it knowing this is a process, and that, it's okay to like evolve your plan, both personal and professional, while you're on this journey.
Do you feel though, yes, the plan can evolve, but there is still a conscious effort that you make to set specific goals? Look, not necessarily for the business.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not sure. I don't mean to get into semantics, but there's like vision and then there's the mission on how I get there. I think the mission has been like, the path has changed, right? Yeah. And the how and the tactics have changed. But the vision has always been to create a wonderful brand that's approachable, that's healthy, and helps families eat healthier, basically. That's kind of the vision. And I just didn't see a brand out there or a product offering out there that did that. We're getting a lot more focused, so we're focused on healthy beverages. We're obviously in the milk space. We're in lactose-free, plant-based, and organic. So we're getting more focused, but that is kind of the vision. To answer your question, yeah, we have kind of like a North Star, but the way you get there, kind of has changed along the
I would
path.
Imagine so, yeah. The day-to-day has to.
Yeah.
But that North Star being there, I guess, that's the answer to it. Would you change anything? Would you change anything about what your journey has been so far?
So honestly, nothing, because the biggest failures have been like the biggest golden nuggets in disguise. So like, now, if you asked me while I was in the middle of that challenge, I'd be like, oh my God, I got to change this. Like, where's the time machine? But when I look back at the big, like, someone didn't pay us like $250,000 once. And we were like, back in the early days, that was a huge amount of money for us. And I was like, oh my God, am I going to fold this thing up? Or a retailer like screwed us big time, or we had a huge supply chain issue, or COVID, containers are like 10 months delayed, it's just crazy. So every single one of those experiences, like I'll give you an example. There were 2 horrible years that we had. And then the following year, we had the best year ever.
Wow.
And the only reason we had the best year ever is we had 2 horrible years, and we learned, from those problems. So short answer, no, I wouldn't change anything. And the question, I think, proves to everyone that, your challenges are your best learnings.
When it comes to those lows, though, knowing that you had to go through those tough 2 years to get to that brilliant, beautiful year, you know that there are probably going to be more.
Sure.
I don't like calling them failures, but there are going to be more obstacles coming.
Oh, yeah.
Do you truly approach them differently?
Yeah.
Or do you still fall flat and need to go through that process mentally, emotionally to get to a space where, okay, I've recovered. I can do this.
Yeah. No, I do. I think that now I've just built up so much self-confidence in my ability to react, and I don't react with emotion nearly as much as I would before. My emotional reaction is down like 90 points because it's just pointless. Getting angry or worried is a waste of energy. I'd rather spend that same energy on solving the problem. So, and I think if you look at the culture of the company, there's from the top down, it's permeated through my employees. We're like, if something goes wrong, there's no finger pointing. We're like, okay, we screwed up. How do we fix it? And everyone's just kind of huddling together. And that's really beautiful about the culture. And that's how I live my life now, both personal and professional. I'm like, okay, it is what it is. What are you going to do? Let's figure it out. So a bit stoic, and how I look at it, but I am different than before.
That's amazing. Good for you.
Thanks.
Good for you. As kind of a full or final question, I usually ask, what question would you pose to me based on everything that we discussed today? What would you want me to consider?
How can I get your hair?
I mean,
you have the most beautiful hair I've ever seen. It looks so cool.
That's so kind of you. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Well, I think jokes aside, you've interviewed so many entrepreneurs. You have like a really nice viewpoint. I'm just curious, like, of everyone that you've met and all the things that you've learned, I don't know, what's your big takeaway on what you think makes someone successful or happy, let's say?
Successful. I'm going to say happy, not successful, because I think success is something that everyone defines on their own terms versus the illusion of what the world has told us success is. And I think the day that you realize that is a pivotal day in your life, no matter who you are.
Yeah.
But I think when it comes to happiness, 1, happiness is a choice. 2, no one has it figured out. And I think that's why I'm so adamant on this idea of I don't like the notion of following specific quote unquote advice or a rule book or someone else telling me what to do, because I feel like the context of my life, your life, their lives, there are things and nuances and circumstances, and there are things we're never going to get and never going to understand. And I think the process of learning to trust yourself and make decisions that work for you is such a hard thing to learn. And I think once you get into the habit of training yourself to go back to that place where you are learning to listen to yourself and work from that space, I think that's when you start to get to a place where you're ready to be happy.
Yeah.
And I feel like I learned that the hard way, but I don't even think I've learned it completely. I'm still trying.
Well, that's cool. I like it.
Yeah.
I'm still jealous of the hair.
Yeah. I don't blame you.
Yeah.
Mustafa, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
It was such a pleasure.
Yeah,
and thank
me
you for
too.
being so open.
Yeah, no worries. There's no other way.
Love it. Thank you. Where can our audience find your products in the region?
So, I mean, in the UAE, we're in all the major retailers. We're online on koita.com, Koita.com. And if you have a chance, follow us on Instagram. The Instagram handle is It's Koita, ITSKOITA.
Nice. Very cool. To all our listeners, I want to thank you for the privilege of your time. I want to ask you a favor. If you liked the episode, please like, comment, or share. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to it. Any and all support is very much appreciated. In the meantime, I hope you found something to consider.